afternoon, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining 32BJ's Black History Month celebration. Today, we're excited to celebrate the richness of Black history, activism, and talent across our union and beyond. In the past, we celebrated Black History Month together in our districts. We shared food and laughter, but due to the pandemic's ever-evolving nature, we couldn't plan an in-person event this year. However, we're determined to recognize the talents and foundational contributions of our Black community and our members, and we will not be stopped by a pandemic. During today's event, we'll be celebrating trailblazers in their fields, leaders both in and outside of 32BJ, who have led transformative change in their respective communities. We'll be discussing key issues to the Black American experience today that are relevant to our own 32BJ community and beyond. Personally, as the first Black president of this union, I'm thrilled to host this celebration. Black history is American history. And I thank you for joining today's program. We're ready to get started. I can't think of a better way to kick things off than to look back at the Black elevator operator, Thomas Young, a former vice president of 32BJ who led our union's first strike in the garment district.
In 1934, New York City, like the rest of the country, is in the grip of the Great Depression. A West Indian immigrant named Tom Young wants to get started as an elevator operator. Instead, he helps start a revolution.
The management of 501, my building, gave word to the starter to keep an eye on that radical, Tom Young. He was trying to introduce unionism. Whoever heard of elevator operators and porters joining the union, you know what I'm saying. So the starter was given his instruction. You got to get rid of him. He's a danger, you know. And the starter finally worked things out. He was on one of the floors when my car stopped. And we had instruction, you know, to say, down please, up please. But when I stopped on the floor, I didn't say, down please. I said, watch your step, please. But he wanted to get something. He said to me, down. I went down, came down to the floor. He said, you're through. So lo and behold, with no money and a few hundred members, struck 501. All on account of this down please and the idea of getting rid of this union before it get too big for its britches.
To win their strike, Young and the members of his independent union joined forces with a tiny 2-month-old local of the Building Service Employees International Union. Just a few months later, an uppity local 32B shuts down the entire garment district.
We went out on strike, but at the end of the day, with the flying squads, as we called them at that time, going into buildings, strike is on, come on out. You come out voluntarily, or we brought you out. You know, very nice way. We brought you out. At the end of the day, we had about 2,000 people signed up and became members. They brought scabs in from Pennsylvania, from upstate New York, from New Jersey, and they had their goons in the building, in the hallway, you know, and sawed off building queues and all kinds of that. Quite a few of our men got hurt in that strike. Got hurt real badly, but we gave as good as we took because we had flying squad. We were hungry, we were young, and we were determined nobody's going to take this away from us now.
With the help of the Teamsters and the ILGWU, 32B strikes again and again, doubling, then tripling its membership. Almost overnight, it grows into one of the most powerful unions in New York and pumps new life into a struggling building service employees union. By 1941, almost 1/3 of BSEIU's 70,000 members are in one local, 32B.
Good afternoon, Representative Pressley. Thank you so much for joining us today in our celebration of Black History Month with 32BJ. As a means of introduction, Representative Pressley is a U.S. Representative for Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District since 2019. Her district includes northern 3/4 of Boston, most of Cambridge and parts of Milton, as well as all of Chelsea, Everett, Randolph, and Somerville. Welcome. Thank you so much again for joining us today. I also learned that you're an Aquarian like I am, and you just celebrate your birthday the day before mine, February 3rd. Happy belated birthday.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. And it's always good to meet a fellow Aquarian. And they say we're the ultimate humanitarians. And so, you know, it's great to meet someone who you are Black history yourself, in fact, you know, so we thank you for your contributions and, you know, proud to be a partner with you in the work of social justice and workers' rights, and excited to get into this conversation. Of course, Black history is American history, so that's really Black history is every day. But but I do appreciate the opportunity to sit at this virtual table with you for the official observance of Black history.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate it. And our members there in Massachusetts really love and support you, and because they know that you've been a champion for working people there. So thank you again. So let's just jump right in. I have a series of questions. I'm not sure we'll get to them all, but I think I'd like to start with, what was the hardest race you ever ran for public office, and what made it so difficult?
The hardest? They've all been challenging. You know, I think, you know, first of all, I commend, you know, every person who puts their name out there. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, you know, to run, and these are not decisions to be entered into lightly. You know, I was an aide for a number of years. I was an aide to Senator John Kerry for 11 years. And prior to that, Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II for 4.5 years. And of course, I served on the Boston City Council for 8 years, and now have been in Congress for 3. But I've been doing the work of movement building since I was quite literally in utero. My mother was a tenants' rights. She held many jobs and played many roles in community, but the one that really stands out in my mind is her work with the Urban League of Chicago, where she was a tenants' rights activist and organizer. And so, and then I worked my very first campaign at the age of 10. So I say all that to say I've been doing the work of movement building and electoral politics for a very long time. And ultimately, when I made the decision to run, I saw it as a furthering and an extension of really what had been a lifetime of service. You know, my mother, speaking of Black history, you know, a child's first teacher is their parent. And my mother made sure that I knew Black history. She did not read me sort of traditional bedtime stories about princesses and being saved by anyone. She read me the speeches of Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. And she made sure I knew that to be Black was a beautiful thing, something to be proud of, but that I was being born into a struggle. And she had an expectation that I would do my part in that struggle in the work of liberation of Black people and all marginalized people. And so I ran for city council in Boston in 2008, ultimately becoming the first woman of color to serve on that body in its 100-year history. I'm currently representing the Massachusetts 7th Congressional seat in Congress, and I'm the first person of color to represent the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the House of Representatives in its 230-year history. We have a local professor here, Carol Hardy Fanta, who said that when women of color break ceilings, they're not glass, they're concrete. And so when you ask what was the most challenging run, I would say both. You know, Boston's it's a wonderful city, but a very tribal and parochial place, an adopted home for me. And so when I ran for office the first time, not being born and raised here, and also there having never been a woman of color elected to the council in its history, There were unique joys and pains in that process. But ultimately, I'm just grateful to have earned the confidence and the trust and the partnership of the electorate, both as a city councilor for 8 years and now as a member of Congress.
Well, actually, I was going to go to another question I think you've already answered in the first question, which was, did you know growing up that you would go into politics or activism? And similar to my upbringing, your mother was an activist, and obviously it's within your DNA. And I appreciate hearing that history because it's actually very similar to the one that I had coming up, as my father was an activist in the civil rights movement and a union organizer.
Wow.
So he
Wow.
held a captive audience every Sunday morning as we listened to speeches of Dr. King and Malcolm X on his Reel to Reels. So I definitely appreciate.
Wow. Yes, so much alignment there, my fellow Aquarian.
Absolutely.
And that you had an extraordinary role model and teacher, in your parent and your father in particular.
Yes.
And, when I think about the civil rights movement, which we are still very much in,
Yes.
I think people would lead you to believe that there was sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, Rosa sat and, John crossed a bridge and Martin marched, and suddenly our full rights were realized. But we're still very much in the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
And there is no civil rights movement without a movement for social and economic justice and workers' rights. And the labor movement have really been a cornerstone of that. It's impossible to divorce the March for Jobs and Jobs and Freedom. Was that the appropriate name? I think it was Jobs and Freedom, but the March on Washington, people forget that that's what it was about. It was about jobs. It was about justice. It was about economic justice and economic freedom. What did Dr. King say? I'll paraphrase, what does it ostensibly matter if you can sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a sandwich? So if we are desegregating and integrating these spaces, but you don't have the dignity, the agency, the currency to purchase a meal at that counter, then really what does it mean? And
Absolutely.
so again, I thank you, President Bragg, for honoring that longstanding tradition and making good on all the lessons that your father taught you and that he was an example of.
Say right back at you, and which leads me right to the next question. In your current role, what's on your agenda to do next to create fairness and justice for all of your constituents, all workers?
Yeah. Well, here's what I will say about that, is that as a voter, it's always frustrated me when lawmakers have single issued a constituency. They will come to Black folks and only talk about mass incarceration, and women and only talk about bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. They'll go to the Hispanic and Latinx community and speak only of immigration reform.
Right.
The LGBTQ community and speak only of marriage equality or maybe now trans rights. And if they make it to the disability community, only ADA, and they likely will never engage the AAPI or Indigenous community. Mm-hmm. The point here is that none of us live in big checked boxes. We live in intersectionality, we live in nuance, we live in complexity. And so our policies have to reflect that intersectionality. So when you say, what are you working on? All of it. What are my priorities? All of it, and what in the center of that for me is justice. And so what is justice for me? It's centering the humanity and dignity of all people. But some of the policies, canceling student debt, that's an economic justice issue and a racial justice issue. Black students are burdened disproportionately by more debt than our white peers. My legislation, the American Opportunities Acts, often called baby bonds, which would create a savings, a baby bond that would grow and accrue over time. $1,000 for every child when they're born, prioritizing those lower economic social brackets. And then when they turn 18, they can then take these funds out, and they can only be used for 3 reasons: home ownership, higher education, or starting a business.
Wow.
And I think this really has the potential to be truly game changing. Similarly, in addition to my baby bonds bill and canceling student debt, I serve on the Financial Services Committee. And so right now I'm very focused on how do we grow Black home ownership, which is the lowest that it's been in 6 decades. And that equity and that wealth building is so critical.
That's right.
To closing the racial wealth gap. So those are some of the top line things, but honestly, I'm working on all of it: housing justice, environmental justice, consumer protection, all of these things. So, and being very intentional and very intersectional in all of it. I think at the end of the day, policy is really my love language, President Bragg. And the reason why I say that is because the inequities and disparities and racial injustices which persist, they were legislated, they were codified in law, they didn't just happen. So if we can be precise in legislating hurt and harm, I think we can legislate equity and justice. And that's what I'm focused on doing.
Thank you so much. And as we talk, you consistently have run into my questions through the previous questions by giving more in-depth answers, because the next question I was going to ask was, as a labor union, we have been linking our fights for economic and racial justice, and how do you see the link between these two, and what are you doing to fight for both? And you just answered that, really.
Well, I got a couple more things I can say.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have more you want to add,
I have a couple more things I can say. Listen,
that's some amazing work right there.
Well, President Bragg, listen, I have to be honest. If you talk to my team, they'll tell you that I'm a reporter's dream and their worst nightmare, because I will answer. I will just keep going. I'm an Aquarius. Come on, I have conviction, strong worldview and opinions, right? But when it comes to the question that you just asked there, again, our destinies are tied, so all these things are interconnected, right? So if we're going to prioritize, we've got to prioritize people working at a living wage, being treated with dignity, having access to healthcare. The fight for Build Back Better, if we're really going to build back better, we can leave no worker, no family, no community behind. Right. And that means that we need to have universal childcare and pre-K. When I was on the city council, I worked very hard to grow the number of women in the trades. But guess what? Very few childcare providers provided non-traditional child operating hours that would work for many of those women that I helped to get into the building trades, in particular. So access to childcare is as much about the GDP as it is about our workforce and our families. And universal pre-K, we know that is a determinant of every trajectory, public health outcomes, a social and economic trajectory. It's foundational to everything. Paid leave. I can't believe this is a fight that we're still fighting in the midst of a global pandemic, no less. I was a caregiver to my mother in her leukemia battle, which ultimately she lost, and she transitioned 11 years ago. But the point is, at some point, we will all need to be cared for or need to care for someone. And so, again, these fights are all interconnected. And so I'm going to keep, taking those fights on.
Thank you so much. What would you say to our members about how we can join in the fight for racial justice? What is the one thing that you can do by starting today? What would you say to our members? Well,
I would have said, unionize. But that's I'm not trying to pander, but when it comes to those critical protections and having a job that will prioritize your family, not just your labor, but your life. You need a union to ensure that you have those protections. So obviously register to vote, but the only way to civically engage and to have an impact is not just running for office and voting. I think it's about engagement and information and movement building and that organizing. Come on, labor knows this. 32BJ. Okay. We have to engage and organize and mobilize and movement build and hold folks accountable all the time, not just in an election cycle. Yes. And elections matter at every level, municipal, state, federal.
Yes.
So those are the things. So get more involved in the union, build solidarity with your brothers and sisters in the fight for our shared humanity. And finally, I would say one of the things I love about anytime I am greeting any of my siblings in the movement who are in labor is I love that we greet each other as brothers and sisters.
Yes.
And the reason why I know we do that is because we get that we're one human family.
That's right.
And that our destinies are tied. And recently I was watching the bio documentary Women of the Movement about Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother. And she said famously, what happens to one of us better be the business of all of us.
That's right.
And if anyone gets that, it is 32BJ.
Thank you so much. I know I got to be judicious with your time, so I'm gonna leave you with one last question.
Okay.
We all know how many young men and women of color who look up to you and hope to be one day in your shoes. What can they do to prepare themselves to be great leaders like you are and have been?
Wow. Well, first of all, that's very gracious of you to say. Yeah, I mean, stay involved. You don't need a title to lead. Activism and movement building, there's no eligibility age, there's no shelf life. And Dr. King said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And so I think it's about your leading in a way that is authentic and consistent with you and your gifts, and you're being a responsible steward of those gifts. So, stay involved. The fights are real, but they're worth taking on. Coretta Scott King, and I always lift her up because people don't know that Martin and Coretta met in my district. They met in Roxbury, and she was a student at the Boston Conservatory, and he was a student at Boston University. And so I like to lift up Coretta, and she said that freedom is won in every generation, right? So it's not something that we just have in perpetuity, as much as we would like for that to be the case. It's won in every generation, and we win it with leaders and movement and community builders like all of you. And every single person has a role to play in the movement. Some people are going to use the power of the pen, which I do as a lawmaker. Some will use the power of the platform, the podium, the microphone, the power of the pulpit, the power of their feet. But the point is, or of a bullhorn, which is probably more consistent with 32BJ. But the point is, you are powerful. We all have a role to play in the movement, and we need you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm a big sports enthusiast, and I use a similar analogy that, in sports, many times those players who don't start have to wait for their numbers to be called. But being an activist, you don't have to wait for the coach to call your number. You're always in the game. You can be.
Okay, I like that.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate you taking the time and having this conversation with us, sharing yourself, your time, your brilliance with our members, being a great champion of working people, and thinking about having people of color who have been first. It's just an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have you share your story here with our members today.
Thank you so much. And I'm humbled and honored to be a first, but the most important thing is that I'm not the last.
Not the last.
That's right. Thank you so much. Peace and
Thank you.
blessings. Happy Black History Month, 32BJ.
BJ. Thank you, Congresswoman. Take care. God bless. Be well.
You too. Give my love to your bride, okay?
Will do.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. Our work has just begun. Though we fought and won, the rights of our brothers and sisters is still at hand. We will push forward to always achieve our goals. We will not fall, we will not be weary, we will not fold. As we continue this fight, we will stand together for every human right. We will stand together each and every day. Who are we? We are 32BJ. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the next segment of Black History Month. In this segment, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Laphonza Butler. And I will say it's a personal privilege because I count her not only as a friend, but also I am one of the earliest members of the Laphonza Butler fan club. So Laphonza Butler serves as the president of Emily's List, the nation's largest resource for women in politics, which is fighting to have a government that reflects how the people it serves. And that comes after an impactful few years at SEIU, which is where we got to know each other. But beyond saying I'm super excited for this interview, it's better for us to just dive in and hear from Sister Butler.
Let's do it, Manny. It is an honor to be back with the members of SEIU. So thank you for having me.
Great. We are really excited to invite you back. So let's start from the beginning. Did you know growing up that you would go into politics, into activism, into the labor movement?
No, I didn't. I grew up in the Deep South in a small town in Mississippi. I knew that I wanted to do good. As a young person, that meant being a lawyer. And that's what I thought that I was going to do. Now I just play a lawyer on Thursdays, and I get to be an activist and a leader in the movement for justice. But it wasn't always top of mind. My mom and our family really never talked about politics in that way. We talked a lot about survival. We talked a lot about where, making sure that our ends were going to meet from one month to the next. And I think that's really what drove me to come to and want to be a part of SEIU, to be able to work for families like my own.
Yeah, I have always said I wanted to meet your mother. So we worked side by side for 2 years, and during those 2 years, I was always blown away really by everything about you. But with all your talents and interests, what attracted you to being at SEIU in particular?
Yeah, I started on an SEIU campaign 2 weeks after I graduated from college. I was recruited to be a part of Union Summer when I guess it was now 2001, when the AFL first started to recruit organizers on the campuses of historically Black colleges. And so I saw the presentation when I was a sophomore, I guess in '99. And it really struck me as like the thing that maybe I could actually do to help engage families like mine, mothers like mine all over the country. But I had committed to my mom that I would finish college. And again, I thought I was going to be a lawyer and sort of on my way to law school. But it was about 2 weeks before I graduated that I, applied. I spoke to Mai Crispin, another SEIU legend. I went and did my 3-day as a part of the AFL training program. And it really was having the opportunity to work for and on behalf of women and men that I saw in my family, figuring out ways to help make their lives better. Having learned at Jackson State, the historically Black college that I went to, that ordinary people can make change by finding together their collective power. And that was what SEIU presented as an opportunity to me.
Yeah, that's a great story. We were just reminiscing before we got on this Zoom how I think when we first met, you were 25. You'd already served for 2 years as the Secretary Treasurer of not just any local, but a national food service local, which was one of the more complicated unions in SEIU. And then your next gig after we worked together was you were running one of SEIU's largest locals, representing nursing home workers and home care workers, again, at a very young age. But just speaking personally, what did it mean to you as a young leader, as a Black woman, to lead those unions?
Manny, I had the benefit of sort of youthful ignorance, but also situational awareness. Having had the history and sort of the family journey that I had, I knew that my responsibility was to be a leader on behalf of those whose voices might have been silenced. And in hindsight, it was an incredible opportunity that SEIU and the members of SEIU really allowed me to serve in those roles. You'll remember I went from SWU and that service, that national local union, to working with you and Valerie as a part of the property services team. And then when you guys went back to BJ, Manny, you'll remember I was the property services division director for a while before I went to Los Angeles. And really it was the members of SEIU, along with, of course, the leadership that ensured that I had an opportunity to serve. And my responsibility was not only to lead with the integrity and the grace that our members deserve, but also to make sure that I was helping to raise the next generation of leaders. And I think that's really what those opportunities were really gifts to me to develop as a leader, to hopefully be a model and an example for our members, for leadership that they could continue to be proud of, and to make sure that I was contributing to the next generation that we're going to be continuing the fight with working families all over the country and all over the world.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I would just have to say that the Laphonza Butler is still a name that you hear among leaders when you go to conventions. The people you left behind are incredible leaders as well. So what you did worked out. The amazing thing about you is even with all those things you did, you already have done incredible things since then as well, which I just want to touch on because I find it, again, just awesome. I think after you left, if I have it right, and tell me if I do, you went and you worked as a political consultant, and one of your key clients was Kamala Harris, who was, I think, a senator at the time. And then while you were working with her, she went on to run the campaign and be elected as vice president. I just wanted, if you could talk a little bit about what that experience was like and what you felt when she was actually, which I still get goosebumps remembering, but when she was elected as the vice president of the United States.
Manny, you got it exactly right. After I spent 18 years, I literally grew up with the members of SEIU. The members all over the country taught me so much. And when it was time for me to pass the baton, the opportunity that I had was when then Senator Harris was considering whether she would offer herself for consideration for the country as the next president of the United States. And she asked me to be a part of her team. And I joined a consulting firm that represented her in the campaign. And it was the experience of a lifetime. I have a 7-year-old daughter named Nyla, who Manny, but what would I say to her was the question that I had to ask myself when a Black woman was running for president, attempting to do one of the hardest things that anybody has ever done. And what would I say to her if I didn't take that opportunity? If I sat on the sidelines, what kind of model would I be for her? And, I learned so much. I would say a lot of the lessons that I learned were lessons that were being reaffirmed, ones that were taught to me by my experience with members of SEIU. That no matter where you live, you have so much more in common than you do that is different from your neighbor. That no matter what your native language might be, you still want to do everything that you can to provide for your child's dreams. Whether you are in North Carolina, where children were drinking lead water out of the water fountains at their schools, or you were in Iowa dealing with massive floods, that the right to clean drinking water, clean air, and moving forward on an issue so important as climate change was also the thing that really brought people together. And so I learned so much about this country, and it really restored my faith, despite all of the cynicism. It was an experience on that campaign, Manny, that restored my faith in the American people. It reaffirmed, again, the lessons of the Union, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And that we've got to make sure that they are, in a position to be able to do it. So it was a great opportunity and a great lesson, a great series of lessons, and it was really hard. It was really, really hard. Again, something that SEIU prepared me for, doing hard things.
And I have to say that her victory restored the faith for a lot of us. So thank you for everything you did to contribute to that. So then I think even though you're not that old, we're finally catching up through all those to where what you're doing today. You were named last year as the president of Emily's List, which works to get women elected to office. Tell us all a little more about your work there.
You know, the thing that I would say that is one of the most important things that I want the members of SEIU to know and the members of 32BJ to know is that Emily is actually not a person. It is an acronym. Emily, the letters stand for Early Money is Like Yeast. And I know the members of SEIU get this, it makes the dough rise. Candidates who are able to get the early support from unions or early support from their natural networks are able to demonstrate that they are viable and that they can actually put forward a strong campaign. And so much of the history of Emily's List and its focus on electing Democratic pro-choice women was about overcoming the barrier of money for women to be taken seriously in Democratic politics. Emily's List, the organization, helped to break through the sort of old boys network of politics to make sure that women, increasingly now more women of color, are able to be in whatever room they choose, whatever room of power that they choose, because it's organizations like us that help them to build the campaigns, recruit the staff, raise the resources, do the polling and run really smart campaigns that can earn the trust of their constituents. And so it's incredibly inspiring work, very much connected to how I started my career at SEIU. I really just see it as a continuation of my journey to justice. And I think that the work and the partnership, frankly, of the past that Emily's List and SEIU have had to elect so many women across this country, the vice president being one of them, not only when she ran as a part of the Biden-Harris ticket, but when she ran for US Senator or when she ran for Attorney General. It was members of SEIU that she will say today actually helped her overcome those battles. And it was organizations like Emily's List that supported her all along the way. And so I'm proud to be here to continue the history of such a great and impactful organization that really is working to change the face of American politics.
No, it really is just an amazing organization. And I have no doubt that you will take it to new heights. So my last question is one sort of, I guess, a little more personal, but I guess I would ask you, what would you tell young men and women of color who might look up to you, who might hope to be in your shoes one day, who want to make the impacts that you're making, prepare themselves to be a leader and make a difference? What advice would you give them?
Keep pressing. There's really no magic bullet to it, Manny. It is fine. I was able to find really good mentors. I never stopped asking questions. It didn't mean that I had all of the answers, but I had the courage to ask the question. I think the work that millennial activists all over this country are doing, whether it's the young people who are leading March for Our Lives, or the folks who were running the Sunshine Movement on behalf of the environment, or the leaders, the women mostly, who are at the front lines of Black Lives Matter. I think our future is really in good hands of the young activists and leaders and elected officials all over the country. And I would just tell them to keep pressing, to keep moving forward, to continue to have the courage to ask hard questions and demand the answer. And I think, if you keep service at the center and not celebrity, then they will be able to accomplish whatever dream they have for themselves in their lives. But that to me is really the key. In this time where clicks drive celebrity, it's easy to get distracted from the purpose of service. And so making sure that they stay grounded in that purpose and that they never take no for an answer.
Well, Laphonza, when I first met you, I realized I wasn't young anymore because I was taking advice from someone younger than me. And I'm going to take that advice as well. It was meant for younger people, but I'm going to take it as well. So with that, I just, I was joking with you earlier that our president, Kyle Bragg, and I had to arm wrestle for who had the pleasure to do this interview. And I'm not going to say who won, but I got to do the interview. And I will also just say I've sent in my dues for the Laphonza Butler Fan Club for 2022. So I am a member, and thank you for joining us for this Black History Month event.
Thank you so much. And thank you to SEIU and the members of 32BJ who helped me get to where I am.
Yo, what's up, 32BJ? My name is Jameer Morgan, the son of Carla Thomas. And happy Black History Month to everyone. Let's keep the unity, let's keep the strength going. I'm going to perform a song for you guys called Blank Page. It's an important song of, always starting on a fresh page. I know you guys are always rumbling at work all the time, so always start your day fresh the next day, All right, this song is called Blank Page. Yeah. It's 32BJ. Oh yeah. Why do people like to tell you how to live? Whoa, when they themselves don't know how to live. Yes. They will know the truth and say it's so wrong. Oh, when only a fool will follow their tongue. Yes, hypocrites will know they lie. The wise one, they stay quiet. Just like the truth has been told, many lies been told. Yeah. Oh yeah. So tell me why can't we sit down and reason and make we talk and spread dreams and see strength. Think of a plan, let us find a solution. What you say, 32BJ, what you say now? Let's start on a brand new blank page. I said no, cause my heart is in a brand new place. Forget about the problems that you had before, cause we gon' keep on arguing and don't resolve it. Let's start on a brand new blank page. Jah knows, yeah. 32BJ. Yeah. This is reggae music, 32BJ. If you love reggae, say yeah. Yeah, check it. Well, there's a smile on my face, and I don't want to trace no way, no, with nobody. Yes, no, not today. Easy, Mr. Man, running the government. We're already great, so make us find the love. And I don't mean to put the pressure on the eye, but we really need love. We need love, yes. More love. We need more love. If you know that the world needs more love, say yeah, man. Oh, yeah. Let's start on a brand new blank page. I said no, cause my heart is in a brand new place. Forget about the problems that you had before, cause we gon' keep on arguing, no real resolve this. Yeah. Start over 32BJ. Let's start on a brand new blank page. I said no, cause my heart is in a brand new place. Forget about the problems that you had before. Oh, my people, yeah. Start over. Let's start over. Yeah. How you feeling? Big up to everyone working hard at 32BJ. My name is Shamir Morgan. Salute. Yeah, yeah. Reggae music. Start over. Yeah, yeah. Start over. Bless, guys.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor. It's a pleasure to finally get to meet you. Unfortunately, we're doing this remotely. I wish we could be in person, but I really, truly, and greatly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and to celebrate Black History Month with 32BJ members of 175,000 across the East Coast.
Well, President Bragg, I'm really delighted that I've been asked to participate. You know, here in New Jersey, during the 15 and a half years that I spent in the state legislature before becoming the lieutenant governor, I had a very strong working relationship with the members of 32BJ and had the opportunity to work on many issues, you know, of social justice and equity. And when we think of this pandemic and the reason, you know, we're working remotely, it's been the membership of 32BJ that's been on the front line. So I've always admired the work that you do and have many, many friends in the 32BJ movement.
Well, thank you. I mean, when we were thinking about this year's Black History Month event, you know, I being the first Black president of 32BJ, it kind of spurred in my mind and my thinking, like there's so many other first people of color in these very important high-level positions. And obviously thinking of you and all the great work that you and this administration have done to lift up our workers in New Jersey, you know, you were an easy candidate to see if we can get to have this conversation with. So I'm so happy you made yourself available. And so I'd like to just jump right in and ask maybe a few questions to get us started. Sure. And I think about myself too when I ask this question, is that growing up, did you think that this was the path that you'd be taking, moving into a life of activism or public service politics?
I always knew that I would be engaged in a life of activism, always. Like you, President Bragg, I came from a family of activists. My father and his uncles after World War II came and settled in New Jersey. They grew up in Connecticut. Many of them had been in the military, and they began to join in the 1940s and 50s a number of progressive organizations that were multi-ethnic, quite frankly, who joined together to fight for access to employment, housing opportunity, and you know, equal opportunity under the law. And so I grew up in that kind of an environment. So growing up as an adolescent and a teenager, you know, I had the opportunity to sit at the table and listen to these discussions and the strategy. And, you know, I tell everyone it was when I was in the 8th grade and I read A Tale of Two Cities. That I call that my youth awakening, to read about some people had no bread and Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake. And, you know, these people were living in squalid conditions and, you know, the French were having balls and drinking champagne. It helped me understand at a very young age the lack of equal access to opportunity that existed in American society. So I always knew that that was going to affect me. As a 13-year-old, I remember watching TV as John F. Kennedy had to decide if he was going to invade the Bay of Pigs. So I learned very early about international issues and, how people were fighting for, equality and equity all across the globe. And then I am a child of the civil rights movement. And there is no doubt that what began to emerge in the 60s influenced me. And then when I entered college, I went to a historically Black college and university, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, the first HBCU in the nation. It was ingrained in me as I walked around a campus that Thurgood Marshall had walked on, that Langston Hughes had walked on, that Julian Bond's father had walked on. I always knew that was going to be my path forward, but serving in an elected office was never part of my game plan. Fighting the establishment was my game plan.
Well, thank you for fighting from within. So politics is, since we're talking about politics, is changing across the country and right here in New Jersey. And we can see more African Americans winning key seats. How do you think that will shift the conversation about racial justice in your state?
Well, despite the gridlock let's start at the federal level, despite the gridlock that we're seeing on Capitol Hill, in the Congress, there's no question some of the issues that are being deliberated in our US Congress would not be on an agenda if we had not seen people of color and people from other immigrant and ethnic backgrounds coming into public service at the federal level. When I think about, we now have Muslims in our Congress, when we've got Black women in significant numbers, and Black men, and Latino women and Latino men, these conversations and the agenda that is being crafted by the Biden administration would not have voice if it were not for us gaining these seats.
Thank you. So let me ask, in your current role, what's part of your plans of your agenda to help continue to create fairness and equity in the state?
Well, I am fortunate to be able to have had Governor Murphy appoint me as the commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. In New Jersey, and the lieutenant governor's position is a newly created position in our state, the lieutenant governor must be a member of the governor's cabinet. So I was appointed to serve as the commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. Community Affairs, ironically, was created after the tumultuous 1960s in New Jersey, when cities were on fire, when Paterson and Newark and Camden were just erupting because of people tiring of the lack of opportunity and access to healthcare and housing and quality education for their children. So the department was created to become the liaison between the 566 municipalities in the state and the state government, because there had been such a disconnect between state government and local government prior to this department being created. We are considered the public housing agency of New Jersey by the US Department of Housing and Urban Development. We administer one of the largest Section 8 rental subsidy programs in the country. Administer, of course, not to match New York's, but when we look at the other states, we have a significant presence in the arena of subsidized housing. Under my umbrella is the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency and the New Jersey Redevelopment Authority. Both of these entities are focused exclusively on urban development, urban redevelopment, access to opportunity in procurement for minority entrepreneurs, providing capital for housing development and other kinds of initiatives. My department also oversees something called the Neighborhood Preservation Program. Applications come to us from not-for-profits who team up with the development community, and we will select projects that will focus on recreating a neighborhood that is in decline. We will create housing, retail, retail areas, putting those neighborhoods back online. Also, my department oversees codes and standards. We must inspect every single building and hotel and housing unit that exists in the state. We are the Government Records Council when people file Oprah requests for information, and we must approve the budgets of every municipality in this state. So that is sort of the portfolio of the Department of Community Affairs, along with a couple of other things. And then, of course, being the Lieutenant Governor, I get involved in initiatives that the governor has prioritized.
That's excellent, thank you. What would you say to our members about how we can join you in the fight for racial justice in your state of New Jersey? What is the one thing that you think that we can do starting today, starting now?
One of the things that I have learned being a state legislator, and then as Governor Murphy and I just came off of an election cycle where, no doubt about it, we had lots of advocates and activists and people who are members of 32BJ, helping us go into communities and explain to people how government works and how government can work for you. I think that your members have been essential to us in New Jersey in just registering people to vote. We often think that we have, knocked on every door to get people to register. We continue to have too many people in New Jersey and across the country, frankly, who do not vote. Your vote is your voice. And I can't say it with enough passion. Your vote is your voice. So many people say, well, I don't get involved in politics. Politics doesn't influence my life. I tell people someone is deciding how much that quart of milk costs that you brought home tonight.
Amen.
Someone is determining what your rent is going to be.
That's right.
If you want to be a homeowner, what that interest rate is going to be. So I would say the way the membership of 32BJ can continue to partner with those of us who believe in a progressive agenda, who believe that everybody has a seat at the table, that no one is excluded, that we fight for the rights of everyone. I just asked the membership of 32BJ to do what I call selling and telling. Tell people what the story is and convince people that they need to be engaged. Go to your local Board of Education meeting. Go to your city council meeting every once in a while and see what's going on there. Come to your state capital, Trenton, or in New York, go to Albany every now and then. Listen into those committee meetings and those deliberations. You have a right to put your voice on the record and make it known what's important to you.
Thank you so much. I mean, we clearly understand, how very important politics plays a role in both, our workers' lives, but particularly our members' lives, and the benefits that it provides of being active and engaged. And we've been fortunate to have a very active membership engaged in both voter registration, but also a voter turnout, and going forth to elected officials, lobbying them on our issues, and making sure that they understand, the things that are most important to us that impact our families and working families across our states. So thank you for your work, and thank you for that insight. It'll go a long way with our viewers, who many of them are very active politically already. But we're trying to grow those ranks, because it can never have enough. We want 100% activity in that area. So what would you tell young men and women of color who look up to you, who they're many and vast, and hope to be in your shoes one day? What can they do to prepare themselves to be a leader, such an informed and thoughtful leaders as yourself?
That's a very great question, President Bragg, because we're in the midst of a generational shift in leadership in New Jersey, in New York, in the region, and in the country. One of the things that I often, the advice that I often give young people, do not try to rush your way up to the upper echelons of leadership. You need a lot of knowledge, you need a lot of experience, you need to cultivate and build relationships with a broad cross-section of people. I often like to give the advice, just do the work. I told you earlier that I was never interested in pursuing political office. I end up as a county commissioner. I end up as president of the school board in my town. I end up in the state legislature, and lo and behold, I become the second Black woman in this country to lead a legislative house. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened by me engaging in a lot of neighborhood-based organizations, serving as a volunteer for a lot of nonprofit organizations, providing service to people, help supporting other candidates. Often young people today, they do want to pursue a career in politics and leadership, but that wisdom and life experience will be what will get you there, if that is what you are interested in doing. I'm extremely proud as I look around the country and I see this young generation of mayors leading some of the major metropolitan areas of our country, in our cities. Many of them are very formally educated. You know, they've got that credential that looks very good. But even when they land in those seats and those offices, I often try to encourage them, slow it down a bit. Even if you become mayor of that town, even if you become, a member of the assembly or the state senate, or even if you become a member of the US Congress, understand that a world existed before you arrived in these places. We stand on the shoulders of a lot of people who gave a lot of sacrifice to even allow you to be able to pursue your participation in this political system. I think about that every single day as an elected representative. I grew up in the city of Newark, and I remember the night the first Black mayor was elected in the city of Newark, Kenneth Allen Gibson. I was a high school senior. I was so emotionally fulfilled because what it meant is that I then saw people in Newark City Hall that looked like me, that had jobs of importance and influence, and they set the table for everyone that was going to come behind them. So that is the kind of advice that I give to young people who are wanting to one day be the Speaker of the House, or wanting to one day be a lieutenant governor or a commission of a state department. Do your homework, have your facts. And I was a Girl Scout, and the Girl Scout motto was be prepared. And I tell young folks, be prepared and you can land anywhere you want to go.
That's some excellent advice and words of wisdom. And I like particularly the one, do the work.
Do the work.
Do the work. I'm going to ask you one last question. I was saving this one because I didn't know how much time we had, but I'm sure people would like to know, what was the hardest race you ever ran for public office? And then what made it so difficult? And what did you learn about politics yourself during that race?
In 1996, I was a candidate for mayor for East Orange, New Jersey. It was I had served as a, we called them freeholders at the time. I had served as a freeholder, but I now was going to run for mayor. It was the first time that a woman was engaged in a competitive campaign to be mayor of that town. That I think was the, lifetime experience that I had that set the tone. I lost that race by 51 votes. And I ran against a candidate whose family had been in that town since the 1800s.
Wow.
That family had a lengthier legacy in the town of service than I did. But I also learned during that race about gender bias. Although I was running against an African-American male, there continued to be generations of people who did not think a woman was capable of being the chief executive officer of a municipality. That is, I think, an awakening for me that this type of bias was injected into politics and for candidates who ran for office. I will never forget being in a supermarket after having lost by 51 votes, pushing my cart through the aisle. A man encountered me and he said, "Miss Oliver, you were a great candidate, but I didn't vote for you because I didn't think a woman could do the job." I think that was the top lesson I learned in that race. And I understood how much work had to be done by women for us to prove our capabilities in terms of serving in leadership roles. The other thing that race taught me were the rudiments of a political campaign. It really helped me understand, whether we like it or not, politics is fueled by money and resources. We need money for those campaign signs. We need money to rent those buses to get, our people across the different wards. We need money to go up on media. Yes. And I think that that race taught me the importance of fundraising. And it had often been said that women candidates had a problem with asking people for money. And I think that that race helped me heighten my consciousness that as a woman, I just had to get over having to go and ask people to donate to political campaigns.
Well, that's great. I mean, you and so many other brilliant, powerful women of color in this country have certainly added to this changing and obliterating, that myth about whether or not women are ready for leadership, because they have proven time and again that they make many times the better leaders. So
I often say, President Bragg, the hand that rocks the cradle guides the nation.
Amen. Favorite quote of my grandmother, so thank you for that. Appreciate it. I think that kind of rounds out the questions that I had. If you had any closing remarks to our members, I'd welcome them right now. Thank you so much for joining us, though, and we greatly appreciate your leadership and your partnership and being a strong ally and advocate for working families of your state. Our members greatly appreciate our relationship and the support that we constantly receive from the government, led by the governor and yourself. So thank you again.
Thank you, President Bragg. And I would simply say to your membership and to you, we would not be in the positions that we are in politically in this country if it were not for organized labor. There would be no President Biden without 32BJ. In New Jersey, there would be no Governor Phil Murphy and no Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver without 32BJ and your allies in the labor movement. The labor movement continues to be the backbone of a progressive agenda in this country. And from our longshoremen to our teachers to, to our machinists, you are this country. You are New Jersey. And those of us that have the privilege of executing what your vision is for the lives of yourselves and your families, we couldn't do the jobs we do if it were not for you. So I just want to let everyone in organized labor know that we come to this dance as partners.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. This is very potent conversation, and my members, I'm sure, are going to walk away with so much from your incredible insights. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of Black History Month.
God bless. Be well.
Take care. God bless.
Hello, how you?
I'm good. My name is Candace Tall. I'm the Vice President and Political Director here at 32BJ. We've been so excited about your leadership. I know I talk with Sam and Gabe all the time, and they're super excited about what's ahead for us in Pittsburgh. So I'm just really happy to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too, and appreciate that. Thank you. Tell Gabe and Sam I said hello.
Okay, I will. So I'll just jump right in with some questions for you.
All right.
So did you know growing up that you would go into politics or activism?
No, I didn't grow up in a community where I never met a politician when I was a kid. Like I grew up in what we call the private side of public housing. And so in my neighborhood, we didn't have elected officials, politicians knock on your door. We never got calls talking about who we going to support for upcoming races. And we never had neighborhood meetings with politicians. So the community I grew up in was low-income housing, 80% single moms, young single moms. I often use myself as an example. At 21, I became a man. At 21, I became an adult, but I didn't become a man until I was 29. So I grew up in a lot of communities where the mothers was adults, but they were not women. We grew up in a community where the love was strong, but it takes time to mature and develop into a man or a woman. And so a lot of times we're adults with kids. And even my first child, I was still in the process of becoming a man. I was not a man, but I had a child. So, for me, politics was the furthest thing from my mind because I couldn't visualize what I couldn't see. I didn't get into politics until I got to Morgan State University. First day I went to class at Morgan State, the teacher had asked me what I was doing there. I came from a city where we didn't protest a lot back then. This was in 1990. And I told her, I said, you teaching, right? She was like, well, your lesson is not in the class, it's with your classmates. We need to make sure that the state understands that we want to stay a historical Black college or university. We need to understand that the state knows that we need resources, and we need to understand that we'll do what's necessary to get them. So we have marched downtown. The first elected official I had ever met in my life was a gen. I've never met him up close. I met him from afar, but I just watched what he did to help us get the necessary resources for Morgan State. It was an African-American mayor named Kurt Smoke. He was the mayor of Baltimore. And so him being the mayor and me watching him and being able to participate, him help us keep the school and help us get resources is what got me into community development. And so when I came home, I started working for an organization called East Liberty Development, Inc. And it had been shut down due to racial tension because the community that I grew up in didn't feel that they were really dealing with African Americans. And so it was closed down because of that. The gentleman that opened it up was a guy named Wheeler Winstead. And I went to him and told him that, I would work for free if he taught me community development. And, once they got some money, if they liked the work that they'd pay me, you know what I'm saying? But until then, I was willing to work for free. And so that's how I really got into the political process. I went to work for a state representative. Then I worked for 2 mayors. The first mayor I worked for, from where I come from, the level I'll share with you where I come from, it's not a lot of times that a kid from the neighborhood gets to work for a mayor. So I didn't look at the mayor's office as the mayor's office. I didn't see it as the mayor's office. I seen the mayor's office as the institution of higher learning. And I was coming to my second, to get a master's degree in city government from a mayor's perspective, by understanding that this was my chance to learn what a lot of people that come from my neighborhood didn't have an opportunity to learn. And that's how the functions of the mayor's office impacts policy, which impacts neighborhood development. And so when I got here, I was hungry. So I kept a file on every elected official in the region. I kept a file on every development in the city. And if they threw something away, I go in the garbage and get it and read it until it became ingrained to me what they wanted to do. Because I didn't expect them to give me knowledge, I knew I had to take it. And so part of me being here was understanding that it's how I assert myself, not by what they tell me, but what I'm willing to learn and the hours that I'm willing to, hone in my skills. And that's what I did.
That's a great answer. I don't know if you've seen, I was smiling when you talked about Morgan State, because I went to an HBCU too. I went to Norfolk State University.
Norfolk State?
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Norfolk State, right?
Yep.
So I started at Norfolk State.
Oh yeah?
I started at Norfolk State.
Okay.
But I was 18 years old, but I had a 14-year-old mentality. So I was 18.
Yeah.
So I told you how I grew up. So at 18, I'm going to Norfolk State with a 14-year-old mentality. Really didn't marry myself to education. School was born for me in high school, a place to go, not a place to learn. I didn't see it the way it was supposed to go. So I went to Norfolk State, and I come from a single mom. I shared that with you. We had never, we didn't go on vacations as a child. So I had never been to a beach.
Oh yeah.
And so when I got down Norfolk State, the first beach I ever went to was Virginia Beach. Right? And so we stayed in a hotel. They had some people down there called stickmen, right? And Norfolk is centered around a lot of different projects at that time.
Yeah.
You said a street called Church Street. That was a real crazy street.
Yeah.
And so, me being down there and not being mentally prepared to leave the nest, I left Norfolk with a 1.8 average. So I only stayed down Norfolk for one semester because I didn't have the discipline of learning yet to really be able to succeed. So I left Norfolk in December of 88. I started in August of 88, left Norfolk December of 88 with a 1.8 average. And I'll never forget coming home. I'm the oldest. That's why I always tell my sister she'll be 10% of whatever she get, because as the oldest, mama couldn't be a mama without me. You understand what I'm saying? I'm the one that mama learned her and honed her craft on to become a mother. It's the power of being the first child. So you're supposed to pay me. But when I came home, I remember my mother telling me, like, my first child, and you bring me home a failure. You bring me home a 1.8 grade point average. My mother was a young mother when she had me. She hadn't finished high school. So I'm the first child. And I'm the first one in my family to go to college. And I'm also the first one to come home with a 1.8 average. And so her thing to me was, all that I've tried to pour into you over the years, I was hoping this would be a way to get you out of the street and put you into an environment where you can understand what growing up meant. But I think that was the first time the light bulb went off, because what I did from there is I spent 2 years at Community College of Allegheny, CCAC, right here in the city. Got my grade point up to enough to where I could go to Morgan State. And by the time I got to Morgan State, I was prepared to learn. I was prepared to make sure I came home with a degree. And when I got my degree, the first person I gave my degree, I don't even have my degree, I gave it to my mother. Because that was my way of thanking her for staying with me. But also, she don't understand that's the first time the light bulb went off, because that's the first time I felt like I hurt my mother. And so I had to change that narrative. And that's what I worked to do. But without Morgan State, I wouldn't be here today. So I don't mind saying that I had a 1.8 at Norfolk State. I don't mind saying I had to come home and go to CCAC, because out of my pain came joy. And without that pain, I may not experience the joy of graduating from Morgan State University, and I wouldn't be sitting here today.
So, politics, it's changing. We're seeing more and more African Americans elected to office across the country and in key states. How do you think that will shift the conversation around racial justice?
I think that whenever you have representation, the conversation begins to shift. And does that mean it's going to be done tomorrow? No. There still has to be a lot of work done. And so, you know, the fact that there still has to be a lot of work done, I don't want people to think just because you have more African Americans, the advocacy has to stop. The advocacy can never stop. You know, have we made progress? Yes. Have we gotten to where we want to get to? No. But when you talk about moving a race from slavery to the White House, that's a story that probably needs to be told more often, particularly to our young people. Like when I talk to young people, my staff that's here, they hear me say it all the time, that the African-American story is amazing. And it took me a long time to understand it, but I wish I would have understood it at 8, 9, and 10 years old, but I did. But, you know, to have a story where you got no reparations, a story where you were brought here off of a ship, had your name changed, mama beaten and raped and had her kids taken from her, dad murdered, to a law that said you 3/5, to Jim Crow 1, Jim Crow 2, to be able to say that you couldn't go to school, you couldn't pray, you couldn't put money in the bank, you couldn't own no land, to not being able to vote to the 15th Amendment, for a woman not being able to vote to the 19th Amendment, for an industrial revolution to promise jobs to slaves that never materialized, to civil rights, blacks here, whites here, to mass incarceration, to still being able to put the first African-American in the White House. That's progress, but it's not equity. So to say that we got more African-American mayors today don't mean that the work stops. Does that mean that the lens of racial justice changes overnight? No, we still got a journey to go. Look how far behind we were.
Yeah.
So the journey don't stop. I think that because you see a reflection that looks like you in positions of power, that we automatically assume that the arrival is here. I don't know what arrival looks like. Like when do we arrive? Is there a destination that says arrival? No, the arrival is to continue to fight every single day for racial equity. And that means, yes, it's positive that we got more African Americans in positions of power. But a position of power is only in a title. A position of authority means that you can influence your vertical and your horizontal line to be able to give people opportunity. So yes, the title has brought me power as mayor. But if I don't build the right networks, if I don't build the right infrastructures, then it's only a title of power that didn't use it to build its ability of authority to create different pathways so that people can move out of poverty, that people can have an opportunity to get an education, that people can have an opportunity that their people didn't have before them. That's progress. That's saying that regardless of how many we flip, which we have to continue to flip, that at the end of the day, what we flip has created an equity lens that gets people from poverty to prosperity. That's growth.
Amen. And I guess on that same vein, what are some of the things that you're doing or what's on your agenda to create that fairness and justice and equity that you were just talking about?
So from the housing standpoint, what we talked about is that in every project that we do, we're about creating inclusionary zoning. Why is that important? Because that means that in every housing project that comes our way, affordability is already embedded into it. And then affordability being embedded into it, it helps, it assists to level the playing field. Now you could go from 20% AMI to 120, people say 80, but you go to 120 AMI, but the focus between that 20 and that 80, and how do we do it? And how do we ensure that every developer that comes in front of us understands that this is what we're dealing with? We want to see affordability in every project. That helps create a wealth. And I'm not talking about wealth in terms of money, but it creates a wealth of stability in our neighborhoods to let people know that even in the new economy, you ain't got to go nowhere. That's number one. Number two is, how do we create equity in our contracting, our procurement process? What do we have to do? How do we create it to where we're breaking down contracts that gives more opportunity to smaller minority businesses to be able to bid on these contracts? What do we have to do to get there? Are we there yet? Absolutely not. only been in office, 30, 40 days, 53 days. So no, we're not there yet, but are we working to get there? Yeah, we have some of our procurement people, we have our legal people that are beginning to have these conversations. And we'll build on that because we understand that in order for a city to become welcoming, it has to open up the opportunity that people feel they have access to opportunity. Also being able to talk to the Pittsburgh Greater Chambers of Commerce, the African-American Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Asian Chamber of Commerce. All these, they don't know each other. So now we're talking about how do we've met with 2 of them already. We will meet with the latter 2 later on, but having me meet with them and understanding how do we come together and then having an event called Get to Know, where all the people in those businesses get to know each other, because business is not always done on your skill set. We know that. Business is built on relationships. And if we don't know each other, then we can't grow each other. And that means we'll never become a city that's welcoming for all. So bringing those 2 components together is another way to get to racial justice. It's not the only 2 ways, there's other ways. Education, how we deal with our kids, right? Like, we got so much activity in America about our children being violent, like they created this culture of violence, right? Like they woke up at 5 and said, we're gonna create a culture of violence by 13. No, they didn't create this culture. This culture was created by us. We're the generation that created violence. And I think that violence happens in many different forms. I'll be honest, I think music plays a major part. Music moves emotions. If I listen to a certain song that talks about killing every day, then it's like a person that reads scripture every day. Them lyrics become my scripture, and it's something that I believe in. And then you put that component to we glorify drug dealing, we glorify gun toting in movies all day that our kids watch. So you got the music, you got the movie, now we got this new thing called videos, where you can have kids playing Fortnite all day long, and you can hear them talking about he's over there, go get him, kill him. They didn't create video games. They didn't write the lyrics to music. They didn't highlight a culture of violence in our media. We did. And so this is a public health pandemic that we're in. Because we've created this for so long, our children are living in a state of time, and so are we, of a public health pandemic called violence. And if we don't begin to work on the prongs of how we solve it, it's problematic for us. And that's why I asked for a public health plan that we'll be addressing soon.
Exciting. I know we don't want to take up a lot of your time, so I'm going to skip ahead to this question, which is, what would you tell young men and women of color who look up to you and hope to be in your shoes one day? What can they do to prepare themselves to be a leader?
Yeah, wow. Wow. Build yourself up. Start from the bottom. And don't focus on success. Focus on growth. Success can have you think that you got to a level of attainment that defines you, and it doesn't. Because you can pass the test and flunk the course. But if you focus on growth, you'll fall in love with learning. And I would tell them that the most beautiful thing about life is to learn every day. The time that I know I rob myself is when I go home in the evening and I don't feel like I learned anything, right? So, and I'm not talking about something big, I'm talking about something small. It's called the step, that first step. I believe to be great at whatever you want to do in life, you have to be a student. And so I tell people the best teachers are the best students. I'm a student every single day. And I would tell them to be the best student that you can. Because the more you study about what you want to be, your destiny will come to light. But that's because the only way that happens is if you become a student. There's sometimes that I wish that someone would explain to me how powerful it is to be a student when I was in high school. Because I felt like I left a lot on the table in high school because I didn't understand what it meant to be a student. I understood what it meant to go play basketball, but I didn't know what it meant to be a student. And I think that the more these kids understand to be a student, regardless of what your destiny is or what track you go on to get to your destiny, you being a student of self will grow you. So don't worry about success. Don't let success be your character. Let growth be your character. Because in growth, you will find a stronger love for self, and you will find a stronger humility for self that will allow you to accept yourself even with your childhood scars. And in doing so, you'll be able to face the world because you were able to face yourself. And I wish that our kids could learn that at an earlier age, because then they would understand that this is what I have to do to get out the condition that I'm in. Learning, starting with yourself, is prosperous to grow.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was really amazing. We, obviously our local folks love you, and we'll stay in touch, and we hope we can work together more and more and more. We're gonna put this into a video, and we'll send you the link to it after it's all compiled.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for having me today. Tell Sam and Gabe again, I asked about him, tell him I said much love, and I'll talk to him soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Hi, I'm Candace Tall, Vice President and Political Director here at 32BJ. We're now at the awards portion of this Black History Month celebration. And I am very proud to present our Hazel Ingram Award, named after our beloved New York member who passed away 4 years ago. Hazel may be gone, but she's remembered by everyone at 32BJ, not just of those of us in New York, but throughout our union. When it came time to negotiate contracts, she was there. Whenever we were organizing, she was there. For over 65 years, Hazel was there, in the cold, in the heat, in the rain and snow, marching longer and louder than a lot of other people even half or even a third of her age. In that spirit, each year we honor Hazel's legacy by awarding a member who continues her work of building the union's power through politics. This year, we honor Aurelia Brown and Tyshawn Barnes.
Thank you for this award. This award means a lot to me because Hazel Ingram meant a lot to me. I met Hazel organizing security. I couldn't believe how this small body of women was so strong and powerful. Hazel was in the union for 60-something years. She fought a lot of fights. Okay, Hazel was an extraordinary woman. Anybody that know Hazel knew the power and the strength that was in that tiny body of hers. She wasn't afraid of anybody or anything. One of the last acts that Hazel did, and I had the pleasure of seeing her doing it and the pleasure of taking her home after the act, was a Martin Luther Day rally that we had at LaGuardia Airport. And there was civil disobedience. And Hazel chose to be arrested on that day. At her age, I'm not going to tell you what age it was, but she was up there and she chose to be arrested that day. And we all was there. It was like, officer, that's Hazel. It was like, we know who she is. And they took her in, and I had the pleasure of staying there and waiting for her, and I had the pleasure of taking Hazel home. So this award is not only for me, but it's also for Hazel. My name is Aurelia Brown. I'm a security officer. I'm a union delegate. I'm also on the e-board. I've been doing political work, and I finally realized how important it is to do political work. Not only does it help create good prevailing wage jobs, but it also helps the community, my community, your community, by going out and politicking for the right person to put in office that can help you, myself, our community, and our country. Black History Month, to me, every day is Black history. Every day is Black history. We all are American history. Every day we fight, every day we provide, every day we give to this country. So Black History Day, Black History Month is every day to me. I do the fight every day. I do the fight every night. Can I work overnight? You know, I fight in my community. I fight in my job. I don't only fight for myself, I fight for my co-workers, and I also fight for my community. I had the pleasure of coming from a meeting Wednesday, and I got into the building and I saw a group of young men in the hallway, and I'm like, young man, I didn't know their name, I know their faces. I was like, young man, it's a beautiful day. Why are you in this hallway? Go outside, enjoy nature, enjoy life. Every day you teach and you learn every day. So Black history is every day to me. The union is important to me also. The union taught me how to fight. The union taught me how to stand up for myself. And the union taught me the power of politics. I didn't believe that one vote meant one vote. But when I find out the meaning of one vote is equal, is when not only do you go out and vote, you go out and make those people that you vote for stand up for what they say they're going to do. And that's why I politics. And that's why I will continue to politic, and that's why I will continue to fight.
Hello, my name is Tyshawn Barnes. I'm a security officer at Hudson Community College. I'm a shop steward. Been a shop steward for about 3 years now. I'm very appreciative, being recognized in the union. It gives me honor, integrity, and respect that the union gives to me. And I really appreciate being recognized for my outstanding work that I've been doing for the last 3 years. It's you know, being active in the union is only going to benefit us as members, because these corporations and these companies, they're going to continue to take control of us and mistreat us if we don't stand up and fight and be active and organized. We're going to still, be in the at the bottom. So it's really important for me to, stay active and help the union, and also help my colleagues. We are the union, actually, you know what I'm saying? So I'm really honored to being recognized. What the union means to me, it means a lot. Without the union, I wouldn't have no increases in my wages. I wouldn't know what's the company's up to when they're taking advantage of the CBA. I wouldn't know none of these things. I will be blind to the fact that they are not respecting our rights as employees. So I'll give my hearts out to 32BJ. each and every day, because without them, we won't be making these steps that we making. So to me, I feel like we've grown since 2014. We've been growing, moving it to positive steps. And Black History Month, to me, it's an honor to honor our African Americans that that fought for our freedom, and that paved the way. But really, I really think that we should, as Blacks, to have not just be labeled as a month. We should have like a national holiday for Black History Month, I feel. But that's just my opinion. But I kind of like celebrate it, all year. I don't celebrate just 1 month. I don't like to be categorized of Black History Month. I like to celebrate it throughout the whole year. That's just my motto. But I feel honored, of our African Americans, fight for us, and just paying the way, just making us free, a little freedom, but it's up to us to carry on the legacy and continue to fight. Because when we see police brutality now and these stuff like that the later ancestors that been fighting since the 60s and the 50s, and even beyond that, it's an honor, and I definitely respect those people. And we just gotta keep carrying on the legacy, and that's what I think about Black History Month. Yeah, I just I'm just honored. I just want us to continue to fight as a union, to communicate with every member. Remember, guys, like we gotta stop putting our personal feelings on these topics, and actually, focus on the bigger picture. The bigger picture is we have to have growth. We don't have growth by just sitting around and complaining and not doing nothing about it. The companies was going to feed off that, and they're going to continue to throw little obstacles for us to fail. So we all as equal as one. I don't care what race you are, we all get to come together and fight for each and every other one of us. We can't worry about only our personal issues. We got to worry about everybody's issues, and we go as that, attack that, because they're going to keep buying up these companies, and they're going to keep going up. And we have to join together as well. So let's fight. Let's stay focused. Let's rally. Let's educate ourselves in politics, and let's win the fight, the real fight.
We also honor outstanding members across our union. These are our most loyal members, active in all across our jurisdictions. They're leaders in their shops and leaders in their communities, and these are our honorees this year. Clergy Award, named after our powerful former President Cecil Ward, to recognize religious leaders who help us shine a light on injustice and fight for a better world. Faith leaders have always been in the bedrock of racial justice movements. This year, we want to recognize Bishop Royster.
Thank you, Candace, for telling us about this award and for the opportunity to be able to receive this award today. I am deeply honored by the chance to be able to be here. And I really want to thank all the members of 32BJ for the chance to be able to stand with you over the last few years. But I also want to deeply acknowledge also your leadership, your selected and elected leadership, Kyle Bragg, Manny Pastrich. I want to thank Daisy Cruz for her work in the Mid-Atlantic region, Gabe Morgan, who has been an ally, a partner, a strategist, and a thought partner, along with Catherine Paneras, who has been the exact same thing. Thank you, Catherine, for all the work, and Rob Hill for the ways that we have operated, thought together, been thought partners, wrestled with issues together as we stood with workers at the Philadelphia airport, as we have stood with workers who were security workers that were trying to that were being discriminated against because they were Muslim, as we stood together with a variety of folk, as I stood with folk in Texas as a result of the work that we've done together in Philadelphia. I just deeply appreciate the way that we go about doing our work together. I come at this work from a place of deep faith. I believe in building beloved community. I believed in the respect and dignity of every human being and every human life, and that it doesn't make a difference how much you make. You are to be respected and honored and revered as a human being created in the image and likeness of God. And when employers and others do not treat people like that, when they don't respect their voices, respect their value, respect their worth, then we have to fight to make sure that we win the ways for folk to be respected in that manner. And so I just so deeply am honored to be able to be here today. We're going to stay in the fight. I should have had my purple shirt on today. We're going to stay in the fight and continue to work it so that we can ultimately change the damn world and make it a world where every single person is able to thrive and live their full best life. Thank you again for this honor. I'm so deeply honored to receive this award today. And I thank all of you for your labor and not just organizing yourselves for your workplace, but for making this world a better place. God bless you.
Thank you again, brothers and sisters. This concludes 32BJ's Black History Month celebration. We hope you really enjoyed the opportunity to hear from Black leaders and members of this union who are shining examples of Black excellence. We're thrilled to bring these stories to you today, and you have the opportunity to replay them at any time on the 32BJ Facebook page. And once again, thank you so much for watching. God bless you and your families. Be well, be safe.